Yes, people. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Tyrone Edwards. This is Idbm mixing. Today I felt like we should do something different, and I've had a few questions about my mixing template because I work from a template. It's ever evolving, but I'm always working from a template. So I thought today that I'd go through the formalities of breaking down that and just showing what I've got, what I'm using, how I'm using it. Yeah, let's go. So whenever I have a session, I will load up my mixing template. I have 3 or 4 different templates. I have a mixing template, a mastering template, a stem mastering template, and a tracking template. Today we're going to be talking about my mixing template. So if I'm mixing multi-tracks, I have my session typically laid out like this. So what I will have is my master out, which has my metric AB. I've got a few things in there that I like to reference. Depends on what genre I'm doing, but they're kind of like defaults for like hip hop, rappy vocals, some female vocals, a few bits and bobs in there. Then I just have a wrapper that is actually, it's on a different screen, but it has a Pro Q3 in there, which isn't doing anything. I'm literally just using it to analyze audio. Yeah, it's just to give me an overview. I have a tonal balance control, which is this plugin from Isotope. I literally just use it as ballpark. Sometimes I'll flip through different genres, but generally I'm either on bass heavy, hip hop, pop sometimes, and then I just have Insight, which is giving me just meter readouts. And usually my integrated LUFS, I typically aim for anywhere between 12 and 6. Like, that's just where I'm at. -12, -6. Anywhere in that range, and I know that my mix is competitive within the genres that I'm working in, and is going to work well on all digital streaming platforms. I have my Muse plugin, which literally is just taking the audio of my session and sending it out to be fair, I realized that this literally just sends your audio out to whatever it needs to go out to. So when I'm doing screen recordings, I'm actually using this to configure my audio. My audio gets sent out through Muse. I send it into OBS, works fine. If I'm doing just a basic screen recording and I'm not using OBS, I send it out to the built-in Mac screen recorder. I literally select the mic source and it, or line, whatever the source, and it uses this. Then I have room correction, which I'm just using Sound ID reference for now. This is I use Yamaha HSA-Ms, and this is calibrated to those. I also have a headphone preset. Headphones that I use calibrated. I have other headphones, but I don't use them calibrated. So when I'm not using headphones, I'll just bypass this entirely. But to be fair, this always stays on, this instance always stays on my speakers, because I have a whole section within my template that is specifically for headphones. And I have a separate AB plugin with the same references loaded. If I need to load demos of the session, of the song itself, or like a mix, if I've already started to mix a song, for example, and I'm doing revisions, I'll load my revision in, whether it be in the main one for my speaker output or whether it's in this one for my headphone output. Then I have Sound ID reference, calibrating my Sennheiser HD 600s. Then I have a EQ, basically doing my crosstalk. It's in linear phase mode, in the high mode. I've got some gain compensation for the output. It's doing a whole bunch of different stuff. I'll get into a different video about that. But that's for my crosstalk and helping my headphone mixes, because a lot of the time I am mixing in headphones just because of just different scenarios, different places, wherever I am. Sometimes I'm mixing in headphones. But yeah, this helps me get good translation because it gives me crosstalk. So I don't have, if I pan something to the left, it's not just in the left, and I don't have a real feel of the stereo field, whereas this allows me to get that. By the way, if you can hear noise, it's for some reason there's works going on outside. But yeah, these are my VCAs. These are connected to my drum bus, bass bus, lead vocal, backgrounds, and then music. And then I've got a VCA for the overall mix. So if we go into where the song is, we have my drum folder. All drum things will be imported into this folder and sent to this drum bus. On this drum bus, I have a bit of processing. This drum bus is then sent to my drum stem, which is all drums. Even if there's any reverb, delays, whatever happening on the drums themselves, that all gets sent to all drums. This is my drum stem. If I then need to do any further processing on my drum stem, this is where this is. Usually it's just color. I'm not doing any compression. I have my compression set on my actual drum bus. So here I'm just looking for maybe a little bit more color, or maybe there's a frequency sticking out that I'm hearing on a bus level. So I'll, instead of putting an EQ here, I will just knock it down here. Sometimes I will have my drum bus sounding solid, and then as the mix goes on, I'm like, okay, there's just one little thing that I hear, I'll attack it here. This is literally for color. Same with my bass, whether it be my bass lines or my sub bass stuff. I have two separate buses because I treat them differently. In my bass lines, I like to have more harmonics. In my sub bass, I like to keep it subby. I do add a little bit of harmonics, but I do my best to keep my sub stuff really down low. But all of that bass, sub bass and bass lines, they get summed to all bass. And then again, if there's any overall color adjustments that I need to make or tweaks, I'll make them here. The all drums and all bass then get summed to a drum and bass bus. On that, I'm literally just doing clipping. I have an EQ just to see where things sit, but that bus is specific to clipping. That's all I do on it, is just clip. I use standard clip. There's a lot of clippers out there, but I like standard clip, so I just use standard clip. From there, if I close these down, we have my vocals folder. My vocals is always split into lead vocals or background vocals. So typically it's one folder. I open it out, I've got lead vocals. So if I go into the lead vocals folder, all of my lead vocal files will end up in this space. My black folders, this is just all the effects and parallel processing. So on my lead vocal bus, I've just got same Pro Q3, just doing some analyzing. I have two different styles, colors of compressors for my vocal bus itself. So I have the Any Old Wunderlich, I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a new addition. I'll tinker with this if I'm trying to get a little bit more grit, a little bit more character out of the vocals. And then I also have the SPL Iron if I'm trying to get a little bit more tube sound. And sometimes I use tape roll off if I've got a really bright vocal and I want it to cut through, but I don't want it to be harsh, I'll use the tape roll off. Before I've even started, I'll just listen to the files and think, okay, are these, by the time I've finished, are these going to be really bright and harsh? So if I predict that, then I'll use tape roll off. On the opposite end of the scale, if I have a really thin vocal that lacks body and top end, and it's kind of like recorded quite poorly, and it has just a lot of mid-range pushing forward, I'll use air bass. Because what this does is boost the bottom and boost the top. You get a bump at the bottom and a bump at the top, and it kind of helps fill that space back in. Yeah, if I am going to compress with this, I typically don't do more than 1 to 2 dB. Depending on the song, I'll change through the rectifiers, which kind of changes the character of how the compression is working. Yeah, that's exactly the same on my background vocal bus as well. Yeah, you can see that there. It's exactly the same. In my lead vocal parallel stuff, so my parallel compression, I have 4 buses. Second, I'll make them active. I spoke on this in another video, but what I do, wait for it to load. What I do is, if I'm going to send to parallel compression, I have 4 compressors that I like in parallel. I send out 1 bus, and it reaches all 4 parallel compressors. Typically what I would do is if I just add an audio file, just so there's one there. If I send to rear bus, I send it full fader. The audio from there is then sent to all of these, because as you can see, their input source is rear fader. Their input bus is rear fader. So I have like a 1176 all buttons in smash mode, one style of it. I have a DBX 160 style compression if I want tight, snappy vocals in parallel. I have a distressor type plugin. I do use it for compression because it typically is compressing a lot, but I use it for the saturation that it brings. It does squash things. So then I'll squash and it's adding harmonics, and then I typically will dial this up to about 3. The warmth, I'll dial it up to about 3 if I'm trying to add a little bit more weight to the vocal, and then I'll blend the actual bus itself into taste. Same with these. I'll set them and blend into taste, find a balance between, sometimes I use 2, sometimes I use 3, sometimes I use 1, sometimes I use 4, but I'll find a balance between the 4 parallel compressors, and that will kind of lean into my vocal sound. Same with the 1176 here. This is also in all buttons in mode, but the reason why I've used this one here is because it sounds completely different to this one. And I also have the option of being in bluey mode, which this one is a lot more saturated and a lot more bright. So I'll flip between the 3. Sometimes I use both of those in combination. So the slate version plus the waves version. So that's that. Then we get into my effects, wet effects. So I have a 3D bus, and my 3D bus is basically to give me width and depth to my lead vocal. So typically I will, again, send it out of 3D, send it full fader. That is then seen by the 3D bus, which is then split across 3D A, 3D B, 3D C. Again, in another video I described this. This is basically me doing some chorusing modulation. I usually set it on 3, all the way detuned all the way, and I'll blend that into taste. Bus B is a little bit of sample delay, and as you will see, bus C is the same. It's exactly the same, but the colors are different. So what happens is these are actually doing the exact same thing, but then the plugins that follow are different. So I'm saturating on this one with the SSL channel, the mic line of it. I'm saturating the mic line, so I get a different feeling to what I get when I'm using the lo-fi plugin and saturating. I'm distorting 2.5 with 0.1. It's not dB, but 0.1 of saturation. They sound tonally different, and it helps. A lot of the time I'll blend all 3. Again, I've said in another video, sometimes I'll do A and C, sometimes I'll do A and B, sometimes I'll do B and C, sometimes I don't use any, but I can get a nice balance and blend and dimension by utilizing this tool. Then I have what I use as like a reverb audition thing. So what I will do is I will send that out to, same principle, send it out to a reverb bus, send that full fader. That is then seen by the bus called reverb, which then splits it into 8 different reverbs. So a lot of the time I like to create a space for the vocal that is just fixed. That is the space. Or it's a space that I want to have in at times and then pull out at times for it to be like really dry in certain passages of vocals. But what I do is I don't have like one reverb for my reverb sound. I typically have multiple reverbs doing different things to create an overall space. So I will have on reverb 1, I've got a vocal ambience setting. I will always tweak the timing of this depending on what's going on in the song, but I like the sound of this reverb. So typically that's always in my first reverb slot. Slot 2, this is when I want like really shimmery long tails. If I'm doing like a female vocally thing, I'll have it on bright. If I'm doing like an atmospheric hip hop vocal, I'll put it on dark, and I'll change the size, and I'll change the high cut and low cut, and I'll tweak it. But I like this reverb for that purpose. I also have a wave bloom, which is, it's kind of like, have you ever been in a big space and you make a sound and then afterwards you hear this big blossom of sound? I use it specifically for that, but again, I'll tweak the timing. Again, I said before, I never use pre-delays on any of these. So as you notice on my actual insert, there is H delay across all of them because I will use H delay as my pre-delay. And then on my next one, this is reverb 4. I've got a gold plate. I really like the sound of gold plate if I'm trying to get like a really dark weight behind the vocal. I will, without having too much top end shimmery stuff, I'll use this and blend it in to kind of add a bit more extension to the low end, but I'll change the reverb time damper to keep it nice and tight, so it just feels like the vocal has more weight. Then we have a Lustrous plate again, beryllium plate. This is just to add a little bit more side excitement. This is also followed by the Waves Doubler 2, and it is literally just to push it out to the sides a bit more and give a little bit more dance in the sides. Got a typical Valhalla. This one sometimes changes. The plugin stays the same, but the settings. Sometimes I use a concert hall. Sometimes I'll use Sanctuary. Sometimes I'll use Dirty Hall or Dirty Plate. It just depends on the song. And then I'll obviously tweak that as we go and make it fit the song. Same again with this one, but this one typically stays the same. This is just my large plate. If I need a large plate, it's on number 7. I pull it up, there it is. And then the same with number 8. Number 8 is also a large plate. It just sounds a little bit different. So I kind of had 2 different large plates that I can kind of blend in with other things to make my overall reverb sound. That's what I do with that. And then I have the master fader, which if I need to turn them down without, like, turn them down together. So if I found my blend and I'm like, okay, the blend is right, but the volumes are a bit loud, I'll just turn it down. Then we have other effects, which is like delays and stuff. And there are reverbs here. I typically use these reverbs for reverb throws. Same with the delays. A lot of the time my slap delays, I'll just blend it in. I've got 2 different types of slap delay. So I have, if I'm doing like a rap vocal type vibe, I'll have this. I've tweaked it a little bit. I like the width again that it gives me and the feeling. If I'm doing like a vintage old school rappy vibe, I'll use this. If I want just a standard slap that's kind of doing shimmery stuff at the top end, I'll use this. Then I have my normal delay throws. So I've got 4 different delays. So sometimes I'll have a fixed delay, which if I'm going at a delay 1, I'll tweak it to whatever. Obviously it will lock to the BPM of the song, and I'll tweak this delay to taste. Delay 1 doesn't necessarily have to be anything specific. It's just whatever delay fits the song. If I need a delay, I'll do it on delay 1. Sometimes I'll do that on delay 1, but then if I need to do specific delay throws, I'll do it on delay 2. Again, timing it to the song, blah, blah, blah. The EQs after are just to notch out specific frequencies that are ringing or resonating that I don't like. Delay 3 is Valhalla Supermassive. I like this because you can blend between like a reverby sound and a delay sound. And you can just, if I'm doing weird stuff with vocal delays, I'll use this. My delay 4, I haven't used in a while, but it is there. It is my Valhalla delay. I kind of went off Valhalla delay, so typically a lot of the time this just I don't use it. It's just, it stays inactive. And if I'm doing a song that has this much delays in it, I'll kind of figure it out so I can refine it down to the 3. But yeah, delay 4 is there just as a, I feel like I had that there as like, I was just trying it out and I couldn't be bothered to keep changing it, like adding it every single time. So I just put it on a bus. Then I have my vocal spread, which also this doesn't get used as much anymore because I have the 3D bus. But this was just to give me a little bit of dimension to my vocal. Then we have small verb, which is an ambience reverb, so like a small dark space. I typically use that on rap vocals. Sometimes I'll change the decay time, but I typically use that on rap vocals. My large verb, Valhalla. We know Valhalla is great for large lush reverb sounds. Then I have a chamber, which I'm using the Verb Suite Classics on a large chamber. I'll change the time. Sometimes I'll make it larger, sometimes I make it smaller. Depends on what vocals are going into it. My plate, I have a lustrous plate because I like to flip between the different colors. I like steel, I like beryllium, I like gold, I like platinum. So depending on the song, I'll tweak around and mess with the damper time. I sometimes EQ here. I never really mess with the dynamics. If I'm doing something dynamically, I will literally just add a compressor on the actual reverb channel itself. If it's because I need to sidechain it, I'll do it there. If it's because I need a thicker compressor, I'll do it there. And then I have spring reverb, just in case I need spring reverb. Typically, when I'm doing stuff with quirky vocals or vocal throws and things of that nature, I might use a spring reverb. So those are for my like spot reverb, well, spot effects, like throws and transitions and moments like that vocally. And then it's exactly the same for my background vocals. We have same principle. There's less compressors here because I don't need the 1176. It pushes them too far forward. Yep, that's that. Same 3D buses for my background vocals, and then my same spot effects for background vocals too. Then in my music bus, I literally just have a bus and my effects. They're all turned off at the minute, but my effects are there. Similar concept: slaps, delays, reverbs. Yeah. If there's anything specific that needs to happen, I'll do it literally next to the audio channel. So for example, if I had, let's just say this was a guitar and I want a specific slap to happen with that guitar because of how I'm panning it or whatever else, I will literally create a new track, send a new track, and I will do it this way. So if I say slap, I'll do that, it will end up next to it. And then what I will do is I will send both of these to a stereo track, which will end up, a stereo aux, which will end up next to it. I'll call it guitar. And then I'll send this back to music. Send that back to music there. So what happens is I will send that full fader. So this audio is now being sent to this. If I've got, let's say, let's just throw H delay. I've got H delay on there doing some type of slap. Let's just say there, I've filtered it, whatever. Then I will blend that. If this is panned to the left, I'll pan this to the right and I'll blend it in. And now with this fader, I'll make this solo safe. Now with this fader, I have control over both of those as one sound. So then if I want to then add any of these effects to that overall sound, I do it from here. Then I can just go buses, and then as you can see, all of my music effects are here. And I can send it out to wherever. I send it to a delay. I want the whole thing delayed. There you go. That will end up on delay 1. To be fair, I feel like that's it. My template isn't, it looks complex, but it's not actually complex. It's pretty straightforward, which is why I work so efficiently and so quickly. I'll go back now. So we'll now speak about where all of these buses end up. So now we can go back. Like I say, drums will end up in the all drum bus. Bass, both basses end up in my all bass bus. My lead vocal plus effects, any effects, parallel processing, any of that, all end up in the lead vocal, all vocal lead. Same with background vocals. They end up in all background all background vocals. Same with music, it ends up in all music. And then what tends to happen is if somebody asks me for stems, mixed stems, I can provide mixed stems. The only thing that happens is it bypasses my mix bus processing. So if I go here, I can say, I can send this. What I would do is I would import, I'd go to, let's close all of this down real quick, just so I can give a quick example. I would go to import session data. I'd open printers, and this will give me my print buses. So then I would import that, import my print buses, which if I do this and press OK, it will move them to there. Take that whole folder, drop it to the bottom. So now when we look at the buses themselves, you can see I have sends on them. So this will print directly to that. PA print is a combination of the drums, the bass, the backing vocals, and the music bus. So if you look, that will be on, PA print is on drums, it's on bass, it's on backing vocals. Sorry, it's on backing vocals and it's on the music bus. If I need to do an instrumental print, I have it on drums, bass, and music bus. If I need an a cappella, they're both sent. So it's the lead vocal and the backing vocal. If I need just a lead vocal print, I have my lead vocals here. This will be with effects. If I need a backing vocal print, I've got my backing vocal print here with effects. Yeah, so that's that. Let me just remove that because I don't need those. But yeah, as I say, that's where everything ends up. And then what would typically happen is all of that is then summed through my mix bus, which has a few bits of processing on it. If I need to do a master in the project, like a quick master, the tools that I use are here. When I'm typically doing a proper mastering session, I have a mastering template as well. What I typically do here is I will do the mix, I'll get a rough master on it, just so when I send it over to the client, they can hear it in full effect, if that makes sense with that. Because obviously a lot of the time mixes are a lot quieter than masters. And if you send a client an amazing mix, but it's quiet, they're going to feel like their mix is lacking. It's not doing what it's supposed to do in comparison. All they're going to do is jump to their favorite song and be like, well, it sounds quieter than this. You've done a bad job. So I will send basically a maximized limited version with a rough master on it. So there's no real complaints when it comes to volume discrepancies. But if I am doing a full mastering session, I'm not using Ozone. I'm literally going through my favorite mastering plugins or tools are my Camden 500 series preamps. I use those. I use the SPL PQ as my EQ. Really enjoy using this EQ. I like the mid-side mode. I like the THD mode that you can use down here. Again, there is soothe, there's soft clipping, there's limiting. Yeah, but if I'm doing a full mastering session, which I'll break that down at some other point, those are my tools. But that's just to get me to a place where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to hear any complaints on volume, because people will complain, like clients will complain about volume if their song that they've put all of their time and effort into, obviously a lot of the time you gain stage, so you bring things down, and your mix has to be, not has to be, but your mix kind of sits in a conservative place, and it's mastering that takes it, because you like to mix with headroom, and it's mastering that takes things above and pushes them and condenses them and squashes them and gives you impact and blah, blah, blah. But typically, yeah, this is my template. This inactive folder, if there is anything in the session, like sometimes if I don't have sub bass, I will, if I don't have sub bass, I will literally go to my boom folder, make inactive, and then I will move it to the inactive section and it'll pop up down there. I keep it closed. And sometimes if I'm going through a session and I've done something with the vocal and I'm like, I literally want to commit to that and I don't care about anything else, I'm just fine to commit. What I will do is I will hit commit. I won't delete it. I'll say make inactive. I'll commit the file. Oh, there's no audio on it, but I'll commit the file. And then I will take this and move it to inactive. So if I need to revert back to it, I have it still in the session. It's literally just below. It would be inactive. So I'd make that inactive and it would just be there if I need to go back to it. So that's what my inactive folder is for. Just making things inactive and keeping them within the session. Even sometimes once I realize that I'm not using certain effects, just for CPU power, I won't delete them. I will literally just say if I'm not using reverbs 1 through 5, I'll literally make inactive and I will then move that to the inactive folder. Keeping my session clean, keeping my session tidy, making my scrolling through the screen less, because let me show you something. If I've got a full mix going and I've got all of my buses and stuff open, the session becomes gargantuan to scroll through. So, and think at the moment, there's no audio files in this session either. This is just 3 folders. So if I've got all of these folders open, look, this isn't even all of them, but, and imagine obviously once I've actually got audio files in the session, it can become, for many, not me, because I'm just used to it. I've been using the same template for years now, but it can become a gargantuan project where you just feel like you're scrolling forever, which is also why I have things in folders, because a lot of the time, if I'm not using a folder, I will literally just hold Shift F, close it. Or if I just want to close everything at once, I will literally just highlight everything and Shift F, closed. There you go, closed. And everything just goes back to where I had it. And where I was happy, I can just go through and then I can open what it is that I specifically want to work with. So if I'm just like, okay, I'm just tweaking my mix bus at the moment, I've just got my mix bus open, I can tweak and go along like that. I can close it. If I'm like, okay, I'm just doing my buses now, I've got a fader port next to me. You can probably hear it jumping around as I'm working. I've got the PreSonus fader port 8. So if I'm doing certain things, again, I use a lot of faders as well, but if I'm doing certain things now on my buses or VCAs, I can literally just use faders. And if I'm literally just working on a fader level now without touching a mouse, keyboard, whatever else. If I'm doing automation, rides, whatever it needs to happen, I can do it from my fader port. Same with my VCAs. If I have a great mix and I'm just like, right, I just want to add a few dB here and there of tweaks, I can just do that here. I can do whatever I need to, whatever. Yeah, I do a lot of my automation on my fader port. A lot of the time I will do it on the actual individual audio tracks themselves. Obviously there's no audio in this, so it's not really helpful, but yeah, that's where I do it. Yeah, this is my template, guys. Like, there's not that much to it. The comment section's always open. If you have any further questions or anything like that, just either drop a comment or contact me on Instagram or email, however you feel comfortable contacting me if you want to ask questions. I'll do a few more breakdowns on my other templates because, like I say, I have a tracking template, specifically vocal tracking template. I have a mastering template if I'm doing WAV masters or album mastering. And then I also have a stem mastering template. And I have my remote tracking template because I do a lot of remote vocal recording as well using Muse, the application Muse. I'll remote in, get the artist to record on their end, but I'm tracking through my session. Talkback is on my end. It's all configured so it's seamless and works well. Yeah, so thanks for that, guys. See you soon.